I always believed in fairness. It was one of the core values my parents had drilled into me since childhood. Relationships, business, friendships, everything had to be built on mutual respect and balance. So when my fiancée Lisa sat me down, one evening, wineglass in hand, and said, "I think we should get a prenup." For fairness, I didn't flinch. I wasn't naive. I knew prenups weren't just for the ultra-rich or the untrusting. They were a practical safeguard. Still, something about the way Lisa framed it made me pause. She wasn't hesitant, as if worried about how I might react. She was composed, rehearsed even, like she had run through this conversation in her mind over and over again. "Of course," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What kind of terms are you thinking?" She gave a small, practiced smile. "Oh, just the usual. We keep our finances separate. Whatever we make individually stays ours. And in case of a divorce, we just walk away with what we brought into the marriage. You know, just to keep things simple." It all sounded reasonable, logical. But there was something about her eagerness that unsettled me. It wasn't like I was some billionaire with assets to protect. I had a solid career, sure, and I was set to inherit my parents' small real estate portfolio eventually, but it wasn't like I'd been rolling in money when we met. "Still," I nodded, along playing the agreeable fiancé. "That makes sense," I said, swirling my drink. "Let's have a lawyer draft something up." Lisa's eyes lit up, but she masked it quickly. "Great. I'll ask my lawyer to send over a draft." That was my first red flag. Most couples would consult a neutral attorney together, right? But Lisa already had someone in mind, someone she trusted, someone who would draft terms in her favor without me realizing it. I didn't argue. Instead, I played along, and that's when I started digging. That night, while Lisa slept soundly beside me, I sat in the dim glow of my laptop screen, going through our financial records. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Her salary from work, her regular spending habits. But then I noticed something odd. Lisa had a separate investment account I hadn't known about, one that had been quietly growing over the past few years. Tens of thousands of dollars, carefully allocated into stocks, mutual funds, and even a few real estate ventures. The kicker? All of it was under her name alone. I wasn't angry, yet. We weren't married, and she had every right to manage her own money. But the prenup now felt less like a mutual protection plan and more like an exit strategy. She was securing her wealth while ensuring I walked away with nothing. I decided to test the waters. The next morning over breakfast, I casually brought up the idea of joint investments. You know, since we're getting married, we should start thinking long-term. Maybe put some money into joint stocks or real estate? Lisa didn't even look up from her coffee. "Oh, I think it's best we keep things separate, just to keep things simple." There it was again, simple. I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside, a plan was already forming. Lisa wanted a prenup for fairness? Fine. I'd give her one, but it would be my version of fairness. I reached out to my own lawyer, someone Lisa didn't know. Instead of rejecting her prenup, I proposed a revision. Everything stayed the same, except for one clause. In the event of infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits all marital assets. Lisa wanted things to be fair, right? When I sent her the revised document, she barely glanced at it before signing. No questions, no hesitation. She had been so confident that she was the one pulling the strings, she never even thought to check if I had quietly woven in my own safety net. I slid the papers into my desk drawer, untouched for now. But I had a feeling they'd come in handy one day. For a while, everything seemed normal. Lisa was as affectionate as ever, gushing about our wedding plans, talking about honeymoon destinations, and casually mentioning how financial security was the key to a happy marriage. I played along, pretending to be none the wiser. But in the back of my mind, that prenup sat like a loaded gun in a locked drawer. Then came the first red flag. I was going through some paperwork in my office when I found an email Lisa had printed and left in a stack of unrelated documents. It was from her financial advisor. The subject? Finalizing asset transfers before marriage. My pulse quickened. I scanned through the email, and it confirmed everything I had suspected. Lisa had been shifting more money into her personal accounts, making sure that none of our shared wedding expenses touched her funds. She was keeping everything under her name, making sure that if anything went wrong, she would leave with every dollar untouched. I sat back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't about love, it was about leverage. Lisa was planning for an exit before we had even walked down the aisle, and if she was already thinking about leaving, I had to wonder, Was she seeing someone else? I needed proof, so I started paying closer attention. Whenever Lisa left the house, I made a mental note of the time. She had always told me she was working late or meeting up with friends, but I started to notice a pattern. Every Friday, she left at the exact same time and wouldn't be back until after midnight. One evening, she kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and said she was meeting Samantha for dinner. But her phone had been buzzing all day with texts from an unsaved number. I glanced at the screen while she was in the shower, catching a snippet of the last message. Same time as last week? Can't wait to see you. That wasn't Samantha. I felt the familiar weight of suspicion settle in my chest, but I didn't react. Not yet. Instead, I simply smiled as she left and waited exactly 10 minutes before getting into my car. It was time to see where Lisa really went on Friday nights. For a while, everything seemed normal. Lisa was as affectionate as ever, gushing about our wedding plans, talking about honeymoon destinations, and casually mentioning how financial security was the key to a happy marriage. I played along, pretending to be none the wiser. But in the back of my mind, that prenup sat like a loaded gun in a locked drawer. Then came the first red flag. I was organizing paperwork in my home office when I found an email Lisa had printed and left in a stack of unrelated documents. It was from her financial advisor. The subject? Finalizing asset transfers before marriage. I felt a strange chill spread across my chest. I scanned through the email, my heart thudding with every line. Lisa had been shifting more and more money into her personal accounts, making sure that none of our shared wedding expenses touched her funds. She was ensuring that every dollar she had was kept under her name, making sure that if anything went wrong, she would walk away with everything while I was left with nothing. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't about love. It was about leverage. Lisa was planning for an exit before we had even walked down the aisle. And if she was already thinking about leaving, I had to wonder, was she seeing someone else? I needed proof, so I started paying closer attention. Whenever Lisa left the house, I made a mental note of the time. She had always told me she was working late or meeting up with friends, but I started to notice a pattern. Every Friday, she left at the exact same time and wouldn't be back until after midnight. At first, I told myself it could be coincidence. Maybe she was just having dinner with friends. Maybe she was just working late. But one evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen and saw a text from an unsaved number. Same time as last week? Can't wait to see you. I felt my stomach drop. That wasn't Samantha. The lie was unraveling before my eyes, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I confronted her now, she would have an excuse ready. She would gaslight me, turn it around, make me feel paranoid. No, I needed undeniable proof. That Friday, I waited patiently as she got dressed. I watched as she carefully applied her makeup, put on her best perfume, and slipped into a dress that she never wore around me anymore. When she finally kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll be back late, don't wait up," I simply smiled and told her to have fun. Then, exactly 10 minutes after she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight as I stayed 2 cars behind her, careful not to get too close. She drove across town, well past the restaurant district, before pulling into a dimly lit parking lot behind a hotel. She wasn't meeting friends. I watched as she parked. Her car checked her reflection in the mirror and stepped out. My pulse pounded as I saw a man waiting for her near the entrance. Tall, well-dressed, confident. Lisa walked straight up to him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and pressed her lips to his. My stomach twisted into knots. There it was, undeniable, sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had suspected, I had known, but seeing it with my own eyes felt like a gut punch. I wasn't just marrying a liar. I was marrying a woman who had been planning to take me for everything I had, but what she didn't know was that I had been planning too. I forced myself to stay calm as I watched Lisa disappear into the hotel lobby, hand in hand with a man she clearly wasn't just friends with. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to march inside, to confront them right then and there, to watch her face crumble as she realized she had been caught. But that would be too easy. If I was going to take her down, I needed to be just as calculated. So instead of storming in, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I zoomed in, capturing the way she looked up at him, the way she leaned into his touch, the way she laughed at whatever joke he whispered in her ear. Then I took a series of photos, making sure to get a clear shot of her face and the hotel sign in the background. Evidence. She couldn't weasel out of this. Still, my chest felt hollow as I pulled away from the parking lot, my mind racing. How long had she been doing this? Had she ever loved me at all, or had I just been a stepping stone in her carefully laid-out plan? I spent the next few days in quiet observation, pretending nothing had changed. Lisa carried on as if everything was fine, still sweet, still affectionate, when she wanted to be. She had no idea that I knew. Then came the next phase of my plan. One night after dinner, she casually brought up the prenup again. I just think, it's smart, you know, she said, swirling her wine. Marriage is a big step, and we both need to protect ourselves. It's not about trust, it's just about fairness. I nodded, pretending to consider her words. You're right, I said slowly. I've been thinking about it, and I see your point. A prenup makes sense. Her eyes lit up just for a second before she caught herself. But, I continued, I want to make sure it's truly fair for both of us. She smiled. Of course, we'll make it fair. And that was when I played my move. I agreed to sign, but only if we included a specific clause. In the event of infidelity, the cheating spouse gets nothing. Lisa barely even looked at the modification. Yeah, she waved it off, too eager to get my signature on the dotted line. That's fine. She was so confident that I would never catch her that she didn't even read it, and with that she signed away everything. I almost felt bad. Almost. Because Lisa had spent all this time thinking she was playing me, thinking she was setting herself up to win when the marriage eventually fell apart. But she had underestimated me. She thought I was naive. She thought I was weak. She had no idea I had already built my escape. She had no idea that I had been transferring my assets into a separate trust, safe from any divorce proceedings. She had no idea that I had a fully documented case of her infidelity, ready to present in court. She had no idea that when the dust settled, she would be the one left with nothing. And the best part? She wouldn't even realize it until it was far too late. The day everything unraveled started like any other. Lisa had no idea what was coming. She woke up, kissed me on the cheek like always, and headed off to meet a friend. I already knew what that meant. But this time, I wasn't staying home. I followed her, careful not to get too close, keeping my distance as she pulled into the same hotel parking lot I had seen her enter before. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her hair, in the side mirror smoothing out her dress. It was deliberate, the kind of effort she had never made when we went out together. Then he arrived. Same guy. Tall, clean-cut, wearing an expensive watch and that arrogant swagger of someone who thought he was untouchable. I let them get inside. Before I made my move, I walked straight into the hotel, past the reception desk and up to the elevator. I already knew the room number. I had seen her text pop up on her phone last night when she thought I wasn't looking. Room 814. I didn't need to kick down the door or cause a scene. Instead, I knocked. There was a pause. Then, muffled voices. Lisa's voice. Confused. Then a hushed panic. She opened the door, wrapped in the hotel robe, her hair slightly messy, her face pale. Oh my God, she stammered. I can explain. I didn't let her. I simply stepped past her, looking straight at the man still sitting on the edge of the bed, frozen like a deer in headlights. No need, I said, tossing the folder of every single piece of evidence onto the bed. Everything I need to know is right there. Lisa's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, and then I dropped the final bombshell. I just wanted to deliver this in person. I pulled the second folder from my jacket and handed it to her. She opened it, her eyes scanning the papers. Divorce. Papers airtight and ironclad with the infidelity clause in bold. The same clause she had agreed to. She gasped, flipping through the pages, realizing what it meant. You planned this? She whispered, her voice cracking. I tilted my head. You tell me. Who started planning first? She tried to speak, but no excuses would come, no justifications. And that's when she saw the last page, the financial summary. She wasn't getting a dime. Everything she thought she would take from me, gone. The investments she had made behind my back, they didn't matter anymore, because she was the one who had broken the marriage. And the best part? I wasn't finished yet. Lisa's hands were shaking as she clutched the divorce papers, her eyes darting between the pages, desperate to find some loophole, some way out of the mess she had unknowingly signed herself into. She flipped through the document frantically, her breath coming out in short, uneven gasps. I could see the exact moment she understood. The prenup. The one she had forced me to sign so everything would be fair. The one I had quietly adjusted with the infidelity clause. The one she had signed without reading because in her mind, she had already won. Lisa collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her lips moving, but no words coming out. The man beside her little secret, stayed eerily silent. He wasn't stupid. He knew this was the moment he needed to disappear. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my email, and opened an attachment. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, I turned the screen toward Lisa. An email from my lawyer, the subject line, prenup activation, infidelity clause enforcement. The message? All assets remain under client's ownership. No financial obligations to the spouse. Immediate legal proceedings initiated. Lisa let out a strangled noise, her face going from pale to red in a matter of seconds. How could you do this to me? I let out a breathless chuckle. How could I do this to her? I looked around the room, the expensive hotel suite she had rented with money she thought she would get from me. The silk robe she was wearing, the same one she had never worn around me. The half-finished bottle of champagne sitting in an ice bucket by the window, 2 glasses filled, 1 lipstick stained. She had been planning to take everything from me. Now she was leaving with nothing. I glanced at the other man, who was still frozen in place, clearly wanting to get as far away from this disaster as possible. You should go, I told him simply, and to my satisfaction he did. Fast, Lisa's hands curled into fists. You set me up. I shrugged. You were planning to rob me blind, Lisa. I just made sure you tripped before you could pull it off. Tears welled up in her eyes. No, I cut her off, and there's nothing left to say. I turned and walked toward the door. But before stepping out, I stopped and glanced back at her. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pulling out a final piece of paper from my pocket and tossing it onto the bed beside her. She blinked through her tears and picked it up. It was the hotel bill charged to her credit card. I didn't stay to watch her reaction. I simply walked out, leaving her to sit in the mess she had made, her dreams of a comfortable life off my money crumbling around her. As I stepped into the elevator, a rush of relief flooded through me. The weight I had been carrying for months. Gone. She thought she had outplayed me. She never even saw it coming.